Marina Otero Verzier is with us. She is a trained architect, but also a curator. Based in Rotterdam, she's the director of research at the Nieuwe Instituut in Rotterdam, the Dutch Institute for Architecture, Design and Digital Culture. Marina is very busy doing a lot of things. I've seen on your CV, it's very impressive. She is leading at the Nieuwe Institute initiatives such as the automated landscape, focusing on the emerging architectures of automated labor, and burnout, exhaustion on a planetary scale, instigating forms of coexistence, sensibility and care for multi-species and collective bodies. That's one thing. But she's also curating numerous exhibitions. There's so many to mention, but amongst them was I See What You Don't See at La Triennale di Milano in 2019. She was also curator of Work, Body and Leisure, the Dutch Pavilion at the 16th Venice Architecture Biennale in 2018, and chief curator of the 2016 Oslo Architecture Triennale together with the After Belonging Agency. You were also director of the Global Network Programming at the Studio X, Columbia University GSAPP, and so on and so on and so on. She's also co-editor and editor of numerous publications, and she teaches at the RCA in London. And if I understood it right, you just took over the Social Design Masters in Eindhoven. So, yeah, very prolific vita that you have to show there, but also fantastic work and beautiful work. I think the last time that we saw each other was in Venice, actually, in 2018 for the Dutch Pavilion, which was a fantastic presentation, I believe, and I really enjoyed also the bed talks by Beatrice and Mark there. In any case, it's a pity that you're not in person with us, but thank you for joining us online. I hope everything is going to work out with the presentation, but the screen is yours.
Lately, I've been thinking about the face, a symbol of freedom in many contexts. Showing your face in public now, in the world of COVID-19, is considered a form of recklessness. At home, in front of the computer screen and without a mask, we look at each other and see each other like never before, but now turn into faces framed in the grids designed by communication platforms. But even there, in the open, practicing social distancing, isolation, quarantine, or video call telework, we don't see the one in front of us either. Instead, we look at ourselves as we talk to others, trapped in an infrastructure that segments and separates while selling us a false image of equality. An equality which either we are disembodied faces, digitally separated from our neighboring faces, or faceless bodies, covered and protected against possible encounters with strangers. There is something disturbing about these dynamics, and I wonder what it tells us about this moment about contemporary society in general, which are the territories built by these renewed relations within the face and its form of control and consumption. The face is a product that is designed, produced, marketed, and circulated. Cosmetic surgery, cosmetic treatments, techniques such as contouring, or the Instagram filters have brought faces closer to the aesthetic patterns of the moment. They have matched, perfected, and sold them. Face control is a business for many, from the so-called influencers to security services. I don't have social media and I'm not into selfies, but I recently found myself paying for the authorities at Schiphol Airport to scan my irises and incorporate them into their databases. Premium, this thing is called, that allow us to enjoy priority transit between barriers and borders and without a passport in exchange of our biometric data. In registering in the program, I choose between my activist motivations, which in the early times had led me to not to have a smartphone or refusing to go through airport scanners, and my growing traveler snobbery. Paradoxically, I sold my irises to skip the lines in the airport precisely when it seems impossible to move beyond the sofa at home. My irises are not the only part of the biodata that, with or without my approval, states and companies accumulate in their databases, or faces now hidden in public space circulate endlessly in the digital space. That the face is a commodity is not a surprise, but facial recognition technologies have taken it to an unusual level. They're used to unlock phones and computers, tag friends or social networks, and also diagnose diseases, control movements in establishments, public spaces, customs, and search for suspects. Self-driving cars also have facial recognizers, something that in the future will turn them into tracking devices in constant motion with the ability to analyze images in real time and potentially electronically transmit our data to the cloud. Obviously, this obsession with the face in relation to policing and surveillance is not a product of the 21st century. Alphonse Bertillon was a French police officer and biometric researcher who applied anthropometry to law enforcement by creating an identification system based on physical measurements, which were later used by police to identify criminals. The Bertillonage emerged in 1879 as a promising and standardized biometric identification system. At the end of the 19th century, it was replaced by fingerprinting. Other identification technologies also draw interest like voice, genetic codes, or irises, as I explained before, until the so-called war on terror brought back facial identification in full force. Yet these biometric research projects not only play a role in identification, but also in forms of production that have very particular material and spatial implications. An example of which is found in the automated spaces, such as farms and greenhouses, where data, technology, energy fuel the maximization of the land and the bodies that work it and labor it. These are architectures that work 24/7. Inside, cows and plants are handled by robots, and their morphological traits, movements, behaviors are subsequently quantified and transformed in data and biometrics. Bodies are rendered as data, and in these highly technological and industrialized spaces, animals and plants are rendered less as living beings and more as objects deployed and exploited at the serving of human needs. The low-wage human workforce, particularly with race and gender bodies, is also monitored in real time, evaluated and managed by performance system and facial recognition technologies. Quantification and rationalization of the body and the face at play in this example is also not a product of the 21st century. Simone Nikhil reminds us how the 70s and 80s marked the heyday of attempts to digitize the human body. Much of the foundation of contemporary 3D technology was developed at the Department of Computer Sciences at the University of Utah, which was led by Ivan Sutherland, author of the influential 1965 essay, The Ultimate Display. These 3D virtual representations have been later brought back into the material world of things, or faces. Fortunately for some, the compulsory use of masks now makes all these activities carried out, especially by algorithms, difficult. According to a study recently published by the US National Institute of Standards and Technology, in the one-to-one match recognition procedures, where the algorithm verifies whether the face matches its identification document, the masks increase the chances of error, especially the black ones. In the case of facial recognition system used for mass surveillance, the use of masks also significantly increased the percentage of erroneous identifications, which is added to the mistakes already systematically caused by racial and gender prejudice that permeate the software and computer teams that develop them. In fact, a couple of months ago, IBM, Microsoft, and Amazon put a stop or suspended sales of their facial recognition products for promoting racism and lacking adequate legislation regarding the use by law enforcement. Yet, it is not that these companies were not aware of this bias, as Joy Bolamini and others already exposed these flaws years ago. The Ghanaian American computer scientists and digital activists founded Algorithmic Justice League, an organization that looks to challenge bias in decision-making software. As a graduate student, Joy found that the AI system detected her better when she was wearing a white mask, prompting her research project, Gender Shades. This project uncovered the bias built in the commercial artificial intelligence in gender classification. She also created the Aspire Mirror, a device that lets you see a reflection of yourself based on what inspires you. Joy says, staring into the mirror, an onlooker could see reflected onto her face animals, quotes, symbols, or anything else we could code into the system. Other companies, meanwhile, are designing algorithms capable of identifying faces only through the area around the eyes, something that, on the other hand, humans will also have to get used to when navigating public life in the age of the pandemic. In fact, every time one of our selfies with a mask uploads to the network, we help create the databases that train the new generation of algorithms. It might be too late to want to recover our face from the networks and system in which it is woven. And in reality, our face is not, in any case, the mirror of the self, but its flat and commodified image. Why not then give up the face completely? The reorganization of the face could serve to conceive and put in practice alternative forms of organization and collective action. Think of the revolutionary anti-system symbol of the masks used by the anonymous group. Or even with the subversive aspect of Salvador Dali's mask, popularized by the series La Casa de Papel. But beyond popular culture, artists and designers have also addressed the problem of the face. For instance, the French performer artist and feminist Orlan, best known for transforming herself into a living work of art through plastic surgery. When I introduce myself, she says, I say I am Orlan, among others, meaning that she represents a multiplicity of different identities. Orlan claims that she has taken control of her own image and a claim to her body. Simone Kiel, again, with real face camouflage, also proposed a collection of t-shirts offering facial recognition dazzle. Dazzle is a form of camouflage developed during World War I. Its goal is not to conceal, but to confuse. The pattern consists of celebrity impersonators, Britney Spears, Barack Obama, or Michael Jackson. By using them, the wearer confuses facial recognition not only by wearing more faces than his own or her own, but also by misleading celebrity recognition. There are plenty of techniques and devices being developed to counter facial recognition. It turns out that Juggalo makeup defeats facial recognition successfully as well. And maybe the contouring hits a political position after all. Even easier, researchers with an artificial intelligence firm say that they were able to fool facial recognition software at an airport and mobile payment kiosks using simply a printed mask. Beyond artists and technologies, philosophy has also addressed the problem of the face. In particular, the work of Levinas and Deleuze, although both agree that the face is an important signifier that delimits the other without being equivalent to the physical characteristics of the body. For Levinas, the face emphasizes the experience of alterity. This alterity is what allows us to think about social relations from ethics, since for Levinas, it is on the basis of the existence of the other that my own existence is postulated as human. Levinas affirms that the experience of each phase makes the individual develop a deep sense of responsibility towards the other. And it is in that experience of the other's phase, and not in the autonomous or individualistic posture directed to the gratification of the ego and its desires, where freedom is actually revealed. The phase, according to Levinas, distinguishes us, but also unifies us in our commitment to the other. For the less, the phase should not be considered something natural to the human being or in its maximum exponent. It is in fact inherently repressive as it overcoats and distorts the body and its changing identity. If faciality tries to stabilize and limit identity, dismantling the phase will therefore be doing the same with the regimes it imposes, giving rise to alternative realities. It is important to clarify that it's not a question here of a change associated or mediated by aesthetics, but a political position that allows to become unknown, that is, to move between fluid identities that are only partially adopted and thereby reveal the possibilities they lie under the phase. I want to think that it's possible to bring together Levinas' ethics of otherness and its capacity to give rise to ways of living in common, and the political phase dismantled and of fluid identity that Deleuze proposes. Thus, dismantling the phase will be perhaps breaking down walls, dislodging to see others and imagine with others. A political and creative gesture that connects us to the world in ways not yet imagined and give rise to new territories, becoming relationships and forms of solidarity. I brought this image, and it's an image that was taken on November 8, 2017 by Wu Yongjing. He fell from the 16th second floor of the Hawaiian International Center building in South China. The 26-year-old was one of the world's most famous rooftopers. He had 60,000 followers on Chinese social media platform Weibo. This image was brought by Paul Preciado in an essay that was published in the book of the Dutch Pavilion, Work Body Leisure. And I quote Paul Preciado. Wu's tactical urbanism and image making teach us that representation within contemporary neoliberalism is always done at the price of risking one's life. Within contemporary techno-baroque neoliberalism, the process of gaining visibility for those marginalized in terms of class, gender, race, or disability can't contribute to produce value, political subjectivity, or agency without compromising their bodily and individual chances of survival. The image itself, already an algorithm, an abstract avatar able to produce more capital, and the subject, a brand, a normative solidification of heterogeneous and epigenetic processes of subjectification, might survive, even the face as a flat commodified image of it. But the body of mammals and the earth will not. Obviously, Paul Preciado is pointing to the controversies that I have also pointed to in these other forms of surveillance and what is our relation to them through the face. But in this case, I want to finish with a more uplifting reading of what we can do with the face. I want to finish with Tina Kampt and her listening to images. She refers to images that were found in the garbage of a photography studio in Uganda. They were produced as identity photos that are used for identity cards because in Uganda, it is cheaper for the photographer to take a full body shot and then cut out the face. Kampt encourages people to listen to these images. Her argument is that we need to open ourselves up to a broader encounter with the image that goes beyond what we see, that beyond the face. In these photos, I hear Black Rifoso, the embodiment of practice of defiance, resilience, and dignity in situations where it seems Black people might not have access to these things. How are they refusing to be relegated to a position of indignity? How are they refusing to accept the place they have been given in their society? Camp continues. Do we need a face to connect to someone else? We invest so much in eye contact and facial expression, but that can distract from the larger body of interactions. These images are a perfect example of an expression of dignity, defiance, and possibility. And obviously, I'm not only talking about, there are many other images she's referring to in the book. To me, this is a way of understanding also our possible relation to the face. And while writing about these questions, my only possible and very mediocre advice was that through our Zoom conversations, we start not looking at ourselves, but actually looking at the other. And I had encouraged in different articles to hide the self-view, but obviously this is not enough. So with this project, I'm trying to understand what other relations we can have with the face and what type of encounters, territories, spaces, architectures will be a possibility, a new possibility coming out of this new renewed understanding and relation to the face. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. There was applause, and there's more people than expected here. I do my usual walk around. I don't know, can you see us again here? Can you see?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
I do very well.
So that's the first, there's also another one, but there's the first question. Great. I'll hold the mic for you.
Oh, I actually didn't want to ask anything. I just wanted to wave
you did
hi.
your Ola. Okay. Sorry. While I walk, I mean, it's quite a jump start into your topic today. I guess also for many here, that's totally new. While I'm speaking to you, I'm walking around and seeing. Okay, I'll start. First of all, compliments. I never did this, but it's really great to start, give a presentation about something that you're still working on. That's kind of work in progress. No? That's completely like unfinished and has still rough edges everywhere. But I think that's I think I will do that next time too. I'm inspired by this approach. But I can take off my mask. It is indeed quite a jump to get in there, because you seem to be really like engaged in this topic again. Maybe we can start a bit more on the general side or basic side, how you kind of end up with such topics. No, let's start a bit slower. You are a trained architect, yet the topics that you're working on go way beyond the discipline. Maybe you can share a little bit with the audience, like your personal development, like how you came to becoming actually more of a researcher, and architecture is in all of that and discussion of territory, but it's also on the fringes, let's say, of the discipline. Maybe we can start with this, and how these kind of research projects come along with where's the first idea, how do they continue?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trained as an architect, and I worked as an architect for a long time. But then life took me to other paths. I went to the States. I was in New York. I studied in the program at Columbia University, the CCCP, which is Critical Curatorial Practices, and I did my PhD in Madrid. And I was more interested in the spatial politics and understanding of architecture and the political implications of architecture, something that when I was a practicing architect, I was perhaps less aware, or I was not finding the tools through which to practice in such a way. So I found in writing, in research projects and curatorial projects, the space from which to actually explore these relations, that I see that I talk about the space in many different ways, but not necessarily about buildings, perhaps. although I understand that architecture is more than building. So that's, I think I take it for granted. What I, many times in my position now at the New Institute, is a very particular and privileged position because we are a national institution. And although we are independent in a way on the content-wise from the government and its aims, we have the capacity to enter in a conversation not only with a larger audiences, but also with policy making. So in the last years, I've been very interested in topics that are the crossroads of architecture, design, and digital culture, because that's the aim of the Institute, is a national institution for architecture, design, and digital culture of the Netherlands. And I'm interested in the questions about heritage and innovation, or conflict and innovation. So how certain developments of certain technologies could trigger forms of societal conflicts. And in our position in the Institute, that gives us a platform where we can develop the public debate and eventually have a conversation that could have policy implications. So in that case, that's what I'm interested, like the question about automation and the research that we have been doing in greenhouses, dairy farms, automated ports, etc., has been going on for a long time. So that's something that we have been doing research for a while. And today I just wanted to test something else, because also, not because I don't have respect for the audience, but the other way around. I want to also be a bit vulnerable in some ways and show processes in which we are ongoing processes and not only end products. And at the end of the day, I also get bored of telling the same stories. But this is part of this trajectory in which we analyze the upcoming technologies, and not only in this, in the manifestations in virtual space, but also how they have manifestations in social relations, in data infrastructures, in built infrastructures, and so on. So that's a little bit the question of the face. Obviously has to do with very much with what we have been experiencing so far, and the notions that came to being from the start of the pandemic, and how digital technologies and policies have been shaping our face and our identities in the last months. So I was intrigued about what type of paradigm shifts these policies and these relations and protocols are bringing, which I don't have an ultimate response, but that's what I wanted to analyze, certain aspects of the face and its encounter with different forms of design or research, art, but also surveillance and policy, and see how they come together.
And could you, Max, could you elaborate briefly for us the various steps? So you find a topic such as this, eventually it becomes a research project, and then it usually translates into an exhibition or even a biennale or a pavilion. Could you share these I'm always very curious about, sorry, my microphone is dropping, about the translational steps. By the way, it's super bizarre. I'm looking at the screen while actually you are looking at the cameras over there. It's all a bit schizophrenic. But anyways, yeah, the translational steps from the first idea to the research, and then how you find the right medium for it, whether it's an exhibition or a publication.
It's very counterintuitive in a way, or a bit like counter-traditional understanding of research, because in many ways at the Institute, we don't do research and then we do an exhibition where this research is presented. Sometimes for us, the exhibition is a site and it's the beginning of a project, it's the beginning of a research project. And why? Because there are certain forms of encounters and forms of dialogues that you can have in an exhibition that then could inform a longer trajectory of research. So in that sense, what is interesting is that we don't take the exhibition as a form of display or form of representation only, but as a site of research. Mm-hmm. Then, how I generally do it is I test things. So I think writing is my primary form of research and analyzing. So I become interested in a theme, and in order to think through it, I write, and I immediately start publishing certain articles, and I elaborate them. And by having conversations with editors of different platforms where I publish, I also like the research starts to take form. And eventually there is a moment in which I can say, okay, this could be a topic that could be of interest, not only to me, but a larger constituencies, and it could have like societal questions embedded that we as an institution might be interested in bringing forward. And if everyone agrees, there is a process of bureaucracy, then we can decide that the research becomes a book, or becomes an exhibition, or actually becomes a lecture series. So the medium, it really depends. And most of the times, these projects have longer term lives, cycles that are not necessarily ingrained in the more exhibition cycles of many institutions, by which you have a topic, you research it, you do an exhibition, and then you go to a new one. We like to repeat ourselves. So we want to investigate the same things one and again. So for now, this could be eventually an exhibition in a few years, and then, or it could start being a book and then an exhibition, or so that's, I don't know yet. For now, I'm testing the grounds. And again, because I don't believe necessarily that academic research is the only way to do research, we are investigating forms of collective forms of research. And that is, it's not that we are not doing our job, but in a way, instead of waiting until you have all, completely perfectly organized and all solved, we also start having conversations and showing the research when it is in process. And in that sense, we are less protective about questions of authorship, and we try to have a collective conversation. And perhaps, now if someone is interested in these questions, they can contact me, and then we perhaps work together in developing this in the next years in the Institute. So that's how, in a way, I operate, which in a way is a bit counterintuitive, that you start making public something that is still in the works. But in a way, it's a positioning towards or countering certain logics that have been dictating what research is in the last decades.
I find this actually very inspiring, this approach. And there's also a question from the audience.
So, hi. Unfortunately, I walked in a little late, so I missed the beginning, but I found the image you showed of Wu Yongging, I don't know if I'm saying it right, yeah. Very provocative, and I really like the quote that you mentioned, which was something about imagination, engaging in imagination, or this kind of tactical urbanism is in a neoliberal space can be risking a life. And I'm curious, can you speak and elaborate a little more about that? And if, in a sense, you're making the claim that neoliberal urbanism is violent inevitably? And, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful quote, and especially because it's not mine, it's from Paul Preciado. And Paul is a brilliant thinker and writer. So I asked Paul to reflect on questions connected to work, body, and leisure in relation to the Dutch pavilion I curated, and he wrote this text that is based on that image, or that character, that person, who unfortunately was one of the most known rooftopers, and Wu Yongging, and he was always climbing these spaces and taking selfies, in a way challenging the logics of the urban space as they are designed. So in a way, he was putting his body at risk in order to show or to have a performative relation to the built environment that, is not the normative one. So on the one hand, you can see that a potential of like resistance of understanding living in the city, in the neoliberal city in another way. At the same time, the logics that made also him risking his life is this commodification of the image and the importance of the image. In this case, we are talking about the selfies, or the possibility of like how a selfie taken in such spaces will give you enough followers, enough visibility to make a living out of it. So you see how these two things are intertwined. On the one hand, a form of performativity that allows you to inhabit the city differently, and at the same time how certain bodies, in order to do that, in order to live differently, live in the city, have to risk their life and actually commit to the very neoliberal systems, such as, you know, like the idea of the media, the followers, the selfie, and all these economies. So that, for me, was extremely intriguing. And obviously the selfie is one of the technologies of the face that I'm intrigued to, and the reading that Paul Preciado does in relation to the city. And that's where my research tries to connect, you know, what is the relation between face and territory, which seem, you know, very distant. But I mean, brilliant thinkers as Paul Preciado are able to make that, that gap closer. So yeah, I recommend you to read the essay. Actually, it's published online in the website of the New Institute, so you can access that.
He was actually also one of the speakers that we tried to invite for this double feature lecture series, but couldn't get through. Maybe actually another term from face to surface, and then face, and then to territory. You know, to do the
that's interesting
etymological jump there. So for me, I think this is a topic that needs a couple more days to marinate to get back to you on the references to it. You mentioned briefly, or I mentioned briefly, another research project that you've been doing or working on is the one on burnout, and I think that's also a highly topical one. All of the topics that you've been addressing at the New Institute are very contemporary, very topical. A few words about the burnout.
Yeah, so it comes also from just a realization that many people around us in the Institute and colleagues and many in general, there are not only around our surroundings, but you see the percentage of people having a burnout are increasingly growing. So we were thinking, okay, how to tackle this idea of the burnout. And for me, it was interesting as well. I get curious about these things because in Spanish, in Spain, and in the Spanish language, we don't have something that is like burnout. Maybe you will be depressed, or you have, but there is this thing that you are so burned that you cannot even work, or that's not something that so far was. So it was intrigued about what it means, what type of cultures or working environments or societies have more tendency towards creating a burnout. So we started to do the research, but in this case also a form of public research by doing it through the fellowship program that we have every year at the New Institute. So it's like, so the last 3 years we have been doing open calls to tackle the question of burnout. And the first edition was thinking about how bodies are exhausted. And again, was connected to something that we have been doing before for the Venice Pavilion, and talking about the relation between work, body, and leisure, and how work is permeating more and more spaces of our daily lives, how bodies are reacting to that. So we're thinking about forms of exploitative structures, labor practices, and how maybe to start questioning our never-ending understanding of the entrepreneurship and our somehow exploitation, transforming these neoliberal subjects that are self-exploiting themselves in order to be very easily exploited later by others. So this started like that, but then the second year we thought, well, there is a relation between the burnout of bodies, of human bodies, but also other bodies and the larger body of the planet. So we were interested in how our practices, our labor practices as well, and our activities have an effect in the planet, in the planetary, and how forms of self-exploitation and exploitation of others have an impact in a larger scale. So we were investigating last year these questions through the fellowship. And we also wanted to be a bit optimistic. So this year we did the last open call about this theme that was thinking how what new institutions or new forms of instituting and institutional practices could actually allow us to escape the, the logics of the burnout. What are those forms of organization and action? What forms of political organization that will allow us to have a series of practices that are not necessarily exploitative and are not leading to any type of sort of burnouts. And we did a call for new institutional practices. And this is what it has been developed since October and for the next 6 months. So this has a larger trajectory with burnout, and maybe next year we continue. But so far, this was the way in which we touched upon the topic in a more direct way. And then I think this has had ultimately implications in how we work at the Institute, the type of space we want to create, the type of ethics, forms of working and related to others that we would like to have. So in a way, practicing as well these questions instead of only discussing them, but embodied them and discussing them, which we are not that good on that yet.
Maybe another last comment or question. I realized that the topic of your contribution to the last Architecture Biennale in the Dutch Pavilion has a completely new relevance now with the fact of the home office. So again, for the audience, it was work, body, leisure, and the whole pavilion, there was a bed inside. It was questioning our forms of working, living today from an architectural point of view in a way, but yet, as Marina always does, and you're very beautifully, to me, in the same line of thinkers as Beatrice, for example, also a trained architect who I admire deeply, Beatrice Colomina, who's able, just like you, to expand the topic like to globally, whatever you're dealing with. But anyways, coming back, it has a whole new relevance now, no? Doesn't it, the whole subject? What has been the learning since you have more of like an ongoing approach to the research?
Yeah, indeed. At that moment, we were speculating with what, if any, are the relations or the spaces for leisure within the almost 24-hour economy, 24/7-hour economy and ongoing work. And in those moments, obviously, we were saying things. Beatrice Colomina was part of the project, indeed, and is a person that I have been always found inspiration in her and in her work. So Beatrice was talking about how the bed had become a place where a large part of the population and young practitioners, young professionals work from. And everyone was questioning it, really? But yeah, how is that? And there's these statistics have been published that people more and more work from bed. And now, it's a reality. I think many of us in confinement and self-isolation, we haven't changed, our clothes, and we are working in pajamas. And that's exactly what Beatrice was doing with this performance in the Dutch Pavilion, where she invited people to discuss questions on labor and the position of the bed at actually a working space, and imagining this. I've been thinking about that so much. She was thinking about this idea of the distributed office that will be a pillory office, all the pillows, a network of pillows and beds distributed across geographies, and that will be the contemporary office. And now resonates even more than then. And in a way, it also talks about how much we want to be participants of these questions. Obviously, there is a question about, health crisis and how our actions have an impact in others' health. So I'm not claiming that we don't have to follow certain rules, but at the same time, be aware of the mechanisms of play by which we enter in a form of, extreme self-exploitation, and where there is no limits of our subjectivity, neoliberal subjectivity that self-exploits itself. So I think that was something that was present in the Dutch Pavilion, and now is present in all our lives, I guess. But I don't want to be like in this dystopian scenario, hopefully, and that's what I was trying to do today, also offer understandings on how we can dismantle certain notions, how can dismantle the face, how can we dismantle our identities to become other, how can we dismantle other identities to not to think individually, but think as a society, as a community that has the possibility to change the way in which we act and we live.
True. And with these beautiful closing words, I think this is a good end. I step on the stage, and thank you. And again, it is nonetheless beautiful, since we ended also with the Dutch Pavilion, that research almost becomes a visionary, statement. So there's actually power and in that, on inspiration, also for me and maybe also for some of you in the audience, with the research that you're doing, Mariangela. No, but Marina, I thank you so much for being with us online. I hope we can see each other in persona sometime soon. I wish I could show you around the exhibition, but on behalf of the whole Living the City curatorial team, I would like to thank Marina. I would like to thank the audience. This is going to be the last double feature Thursday, let's say within the next months, where we can meet as a group. We hope, I give you the status quo. We hope that the exhibition stays open during the course of the next months. That's still unclear on the political side, whether museums and exhibitions open. What's for sure is, however, that the program of events for the month of November will not happen here, but they will happen online. So the talks are happening, but it's going to be purely online. So click on our website or go to the Facebook site and you can still see the artist talk, but you cannot meet them in person. But we will get used to it. You can stay in your pajamas, so to speak. You can stay in your bed and listen to everything. Warm applause again for Marina.
Thank you.
Grab a beer at the airlift, and thank you very much.